So now that I've been replaying Ghost of Tsushima since it's released on PC, I've been thinking a lot about this rumored sequel in development at Sucker Punch and what it could possibly do to iterate and improve on the already great foundation this game has laid down. And I know it's probably not going to be called Ghost of Tsushima 2, but that's what I'm going to refer to it as for the sake of the video. But with this game possibly coming out next year, I mean, we still don't know for sure, I thought I'd compile a wish list of things I'd like to see in the sequel that can improve on the masterpiece of Ghost of Tsushima, because this game has the potential to be something truly special. This is my personal wish list. If you guys feel I missed out anything, or there's something in particular you'd like to see in the next game, feel free to let me know down in the comments. But to me, I think the biggest change in Ghost of Tsushima 2, or whatever it's called, is going to be the setting. I had a very interesting conversation with someone in the comments of my last Ghost of Tsushima video on whether this IP is more attached to the ghost or the island of Tsushima. In the sequel, do they leave the island and follow Jin as he goes either to another island or the mainland of Japan, or does it perhaps focus on the second invasion of Tsushima, which happened only 7 years after the first one? Personally, I think it makes more sense to leave Tsushima than to stay, because I'm not sure if there's much they could do to the island to make it feel like a new world. We'd just be playing in the same open world as the first game, which may feel very repetitive. Sure, other game series do this, like the Spider-Man games in New York City, but they also expanded the world on top of what was already there in the previous games. But with Ghost of Tsushima, they already covered the whole island, and if the game were to take place during the second invasion, 7 years later, I can't imagine the island would look too different from how it does in the first game, as that's obviously not a whole lot of time passing between them. So to me, it makes more sense for them to be more attached to the ghost part of the title, and not Tsushima, so that way they can follow Jin, or whomever the protagonist may be, and have a fresh new world. And Tsushima could still be in the game, perhaps you'd start the prologue there or something with Jin before he travels elsewhere, and it's a place you could still go back to and visit if you choose. To me, that makes the most sense, and one of the big reasons I would like this is I would really like to see some different environments and atmospheres in the next game. Tsushima is beautiful, don't get me wrong, it was absolutely perfect for the first game, but it is quite barren, there aren't really any big cities or lots of people, and that's something I really want to see in the next game, or these larger, more densely populated cities that you would see at this time in Japan. We all know Sucker Punch are capable of building cities like this, as they demonstrated with the Infamous series, and I think some larger cities is exactly what the sequel needs to feel fresh. Plus, if Jin is the protagonist, we'd kind of be experiencing all this for the first time with him, as he will kind of be like a fish out of water, as he spent most of his life on Tsushima and the surrounding islands. And with those dense cities, that also brings the perfect opportunity to improve and expand on the free running and parkour of the game. Ghost of Tsushima, of course, has some free running and parkour. You can climb cliffs, buildings, there's lots of platforming areas, but it's not too in-depth. It's still fun, but pretty bare bones, even when compared to the likes of Assassin's Creed. And again, we know Sucker Punch are capable of this, as we again saw in the Infamous games. So with denser cities, I feel improving free running and parkour should definitely be a main focus. And in a similar vein, I'd like to see more traversal vehicles. Of course, the only way to traverse the world in Tsushima is on foot or on a horse. In the sequel, I'd love to have more traversal options, specifically boats. Obviously, there's lots of bodies of water, but none of it is traversable since we can't get on boats. In fact, anytime you have a quest where you need to get to a ship that's in the water, the game will just fade to black and you're suddenly teleported there from the shore. So to not only improve immersion, but to also just increase the amount of areas we can go to and explore, I definitely hope usable boats will be in the sequel. I'd also love to see improved random encounters. This is probably one of the few criticisms I have for Ghost of Tsushima as a whole, but there's not really much depth or variety to random encounters in the open world. You'll often just run into a bunch of Mongols, maybe sometimes they'll be fighting a bear or something, sometimes you need to free a civilian who's been captured, but aside from that, there's not a whole lot of depth nor variety to random encounters. Can you imagine if the sequel had random encounters on par with something like Red Dead Redemption 2? That would be insane. Although, I'd be satisfied with just some more variety to them. Maybe you need to help protect a traveling group of refugees, save someone from being executed, maybe have bandits randomly rob and ambush you when you least expect it. Dynamic random encounters like that bring so much immersion to the world and always keep you engaged and on your toes. Again, like Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, the side content is already very good in Ghost of Tsushima, especially the Tales of Tsushima, which basically feel like main quest arcs, and I definitely would want to see more quests like that in the sequel. Obviously, they'd be called something else if the game doesn't take place in Tsushima. I would think they'd also come up with more places of interest and world activities, like we have the Bamboo Strike, Fox Shrines, all that, and they could probably keep some of those, but I do think they'd have to come up with new types of world activities as well to avoid repetition. But world and content aside, stealth is another big thing I would hope they'd focus on fleshing out even further in the sequel. And if the game is still following Jin, stealth will be more important than ever as he is the ghost. Stealth is already a lot of fun in Ghost of Tsushima, so what exactly could they do to improve it for the sequel? For one, I think probably the most obvious would be more ghost tools for us to use to get the drop on our enemies. Personally, I'd like to see the grappling hook be a little bit more involved as well. Like, for example, in Rise of the Ronin, you can use the grappling hook in some very creative ways in stealth that Ghost of Tsushima could potentially learn from. I'd like to actually be able to aim and throw the smoke bombs rather than just having to drop them at my feet. Double assassinations would be cool, like I say with Assassin's Creed all the time. It's really nice being able to take out two targets next to each other simultaneously, rather than just solely having the chain assassination. I also think it would be cool if you could poison the Mongols' food and drink within gameplay. There's one mission in Ghost of Tsushima where Jin sneaks into their camp and poisons them, and if you could actually do that when clearing an outpost or whatever, similar to the Middle Earth games where you can poison the orcs' grog supply, that would be really cool. That would definitely encourage some more planning and strategy for players when in stealth. Obviously, it's not as simple as just poisoning something. The AI will actually have to go over and consume whatever you poison, but I think the devs at Sucker Punch can pull that off. And something else they could do that isn't necessarily specific to stealth, but still impacts it, is expanding on the fear system. The fear system in Ghost of Tsushima is some of the best I've already seen implemented in a game, and I think if there were more ways to scare enemies and use fear as a weapon, it would be even better. Maybe using noise and new tools to scare them. There could be a brutal assassination you can trigger on anyone that will scare away whoever's witnessing it. Again, like the Middle Earth games, or even AC Syndicate's Jack the Ripper DLC. This already happens when you slaughter captains, but if you could do that to any enemy, not just captains, to scare people away, that would be great. Of course, there would be limitations, and maybe not every enemy type will get scared, or it takes more for them to be scared. That would be very interesting. Another area they could quite easily expand on in the sequel is with more customization options. More outfits and gear, maybe more unique perks to each gear set, more colors and fine-tuning. There's a lot they can do there, and I assume would be a pretty safe bet we could expect for the sequel. Next is something I wish for in a lot of sequels, but not all of them do it, and that's starting with most of the progression from the previous game. So in a sequel, I would hope we start with most of the skills and stances from Ghost of Tsushima, so we don't have to unlock them all again. Maybe some you'll have to re-unlock, but I hope, especially with the stances, that you'll just start with those. Which makes even more sense if we're playing as Jin, since he's already learned all these things. It may be a little overwhelming for new players if they didn't play Ghost of Tsushima, not knowing all the combos and stances you would already start the game with, but that's what tutorials and prologues are for, so hopefully they do a good job of reminding people what combat and stealth skills they have at their disposal at the start of the game. And to go along with that, I'd like to see new enemy types and perhaps even new combat stances. I'm not exactly sure how they would go about adding new stances, since with a controller you can only have 4 bound to the different buttons. Maybe similar to Jedi Survivor, you'll get to pick and choose which 4 stances you want equipped at a time. That's probably the best way to do it. And of course, some of these new stances can be effective against new enemy types. There's a lot they could do there, and one idea I have for an enemy type would fit with my next wish of more fleshed out horseback combat. Horseback combat is possible in Ghost of Tsushima, it's just very simple, and enemy AI will not fight you on horseback, they dismount every time. So I think they should have cavalry-specific enemy types in the sequel that fight on horseback. That would be a great way to bring more variety to the combat encounters, and encourage players to fight on horseback more, especially if they added more depth to what you can actually do on horseback. They added the Charge and the Iki Island DLC, which was really cool, and I'm sure they could expand on stuff like that even more. The next thing, I'm not really sure if this is necessary, because the combat with the katana is already so much fun and fleshed out, but it could be cool to be able to use different weapon types, or at the very least, pick up other weapons from defeated enemies. I don't think it's necessary, and it may not even be a good addition because the katana is already great, and that's where the focus should remain, but maybe just to add a little more of that variety to combat. I don't know, what do you guys think? Maybe we could use some of the Mongol weapons like spears and dual swords. It's not something a samurai would do, but it certainly sounds like something the Ghost would do, using the weapons of his enemies. But my final wish for the sequel, which I already alluded to, and I just made a whole video talking about, so I won't get too into it, but I really want to see this be a Jin Sakai sequel. I think there's a lot of potential there to continue his story, and I won't lie, I'd be pretty disappointed if the next game were to follow a new protagonist. I'm not sure if this is true, but someone in the comments of my last video said Jin's voice actor had said on his social media that he recorded lines for the next game. I couldn't find this anywhere, so I have no idea if that's actually true, but there's a good chance it could go either way. Either continue to follow Jin's story, or somebody new. I really would like to follow Jin as he leaves Tsushima for the mainland, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. But that about concludes everything I'd like to see in a Ghost of Tsushima sequel. There isn't a whole lot because I already love Ghost of Tsushima, and some things don't even need to be changed, but there's still potential to expand and improve on some of those already great features present in the game. Which is why, when this game is announced, whenever that may be, it will be one of my most anticipated games ever. But let me know if you've got anything to add to the wish list for things you'd like to see in the next game, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like, and considered subscribing to the channel if you're new, and other than that, thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your day, everybody.